They said my kid was too much. Then they went on a spa weekend. I didn't think waking up in the ER would be the moment I stopped believing in my family. But that's what happened under fluorescent lights, with my throat dry and my 6-year-old daughter trying not to cry in front of strangers. The last thing I remembered was my kitchen tile against my cheek. I'd been stirring pasta while Emma told me a rambling story about a princess who trained dragons. Then my vision narrowed, my knees gave out, and the world went dark. When I came back, I was behind a curtain, a blood pressure cuff squeezing my arm. A nurse leaned in with the calm voice of someone who lives in emergencies. "Can you tell me your name?" "Claire," I croaked. "You fainted at home. We're running tests and keeping you for observation." My brain grabbed one thought like a rope. "Where's my daughter?" "She's safe," the nurse said gently. "But she can't stay back here. We need an adult to pick her up." "She called 911, I blurted. The fact mattered more than my own vitals. Emma had used an old phone I kept on the counter. She'd read our address off a sticky note with hands that must have been shaking. The nurse nodded. She did great. She was scared, but she did it. Pride and heartbreak collided in my chest. "I'll call my parents," I said, hearing my own voice pretend this was routine. Richard and Diane lived less than 20 minutes away. They were always busy, but they loved looking helpful when other people could see. A hospital was basically a stage. Surely they'd show up. The nurse took their numbers. Emma's small fingers caught on my sleeve, no tugging, just holding on, like if she let go, I'd vanish again. "Are we going home soon?" she whispered. "Soon," I said, because moms say soon like it's a spell. Between questions, the nurse asked if I had any allergies, any history, any new medication. I answered automatically, but my attention kept snapping back to Emma. Through the curtain, I could hear the controlled chaos of the ER carts rolling, muffled voices, the occasional burst of laughter that felt almost rude in a place like this. Emma kept trying to be good. She sat with her knees together, hands in her lap, whispering, "I'm okay," the way kids do when they aren't okay. At one point she asked, "Did I do it right?" Meaning the phone call, meaning saving me. "You did everything right," I told her. "You were so brave." Her chin trembled. "I said the address wrong." "And you fixed it," I said. "You stayed on the phone. You didn't give up." She nodded like she was storing the praise somewhere deep, in case she needed it later to survive another adult disappointment. A little later, the nurse returned. "They're on their way." Emma exhaled hard. "Grandma's coming?" "Yes. Grandma and Grandpa." She climbed onto the chair beside my bed and folded her hands in her lap like she was determined to be easy, to be good, to be worthy of being picked. Nearly an hour passed. Emma kept asking, "How many minutes now?" And I kept staring at the clock like I could force time to behave. Then the curtain swished open. My mother walked in first, hair perfect, coat still carrying the sharp bite of expensive perfume. My father followed with his phone in hand, eyes scanning the room like he was checking for cameras. Emma launched off the chair. "Grandma!" She ran to my mother like my mother was the answer. My mom hugged her tight, tight enough to be noticed. Emma whispered into her shoulder, voice tiny. "Is my mom going to die?" My mother sighed. "Oh, Emma, don't be dramatic like your mother." Emma went still. I swallowed my anger because my daughter was watching my face. "Mom," I said, forcing steadiness, "I need you to take Emma for a few days. The doctors want to keep me." My mother's expression flickered calculation, not concern. She glanced at my father. "Claire," she said lightly, "you know Emma can be a lot." Emma heard it. I watched her shoulders fold inward. "She's 6, I said. "She's terrified." My father looked up. "We already have plans this weekend. We can't cancel." "Plans?" I repeated, my head pounding. "What plans are more important than your granddaughter?" My mother exhaled like I was being unreasonable. "The retreat," she said. "Florida, with Laura and the kids." Laura, my younger sister, the family favorite. The sun, everything orbited. Emma grabbed my sleeve again, trembling. "Mom, I'll be good," she whispered. "Please," I said to my parents. "Just tonight." Just until I know what's happening. My mother gave a breezy little laugh, the kind that makes cruelty sound like a joke. She's too sensitive. Honestly, she's too much. Emma flinched. Her face went blank in that way kids do when they're deciding whether it's safer to disappear. Something in me snapped into clarity. Don't say that in front of her, I said. My mother widened her eyes like I was overreacting. My father checked his watch. We should go. And then they turned. Just turned. Like they were leaving a restaurant. Wait, I rasped, but the curtain was already swishing closed behind them. Emma made a soft, strangled sound, trying to swallow her crying so she wouldn't prove them right. A nurse stepped in immediately. Sweetie, we're going to take you to the family room. Emma clung harder to my sleeve. Mom, I'm here, I said, even though I couldn't stand, couldn't follow, couldn't do the one thing I wanted. Keep her with me. The nurse gently peeled her fingers away. Emma looked back at me as she was led down the hallway, eyes wide and wet, and I watched my child disappear out of my reach because my parents wouldn't take her. That was the betrayal. Not that they left me, that they left her. Later, when I got my phone back, I had notifications. Laura had posted pictures, palm trees, poolside brunch, everyone smiling. In one photo, my parents were in the background, relaxed and grinning. They weren't busy. They were on vacation. I didn't sleep. Every time footsteps passed my curtain, I thought, where is Emma? Does she think I abandoned her too? Staff kept telling me she was safe in the family room. But with staff isn't the same as with family. I hated the careful pause before the word safe, the pause professionals use when they're choosing language that won't get them in trouble. The next morning, the curtain moved again. A woman stepped in who didn't look like hospital staff. She looked like someone from an earlier version of my life, quiet, composed, and unfamiliar only because my parents had made her that way. Aunt Margaret. She was my father's older sister, childless, difficult, according to my mother, the kind of person who asked questions instead of applauding performances. When I was small, she remembered my favorite books and treated me like I was interesting. Then she vanished from family events, and nobody discussed it. Now she stood beside my bed and asked the only question that mattered. Seeing Margaret there also made something else click. My parents always cared more about the version of themselves other people could witness than the version their own children lived with. When no one was watching, they could be dismissive, sharp, absent. When a stranger's eyes were on them, they could summon warmth like a costume. Margaret was the opposite. She didn't charm rooms. She didn't curate. She just showed up when it mattered quietly, consistently, which is exactly why my parents had spent years implying she was not family-oriented. In our house, not family-oriented really meant not controllable. Where is Emma? In the family room, I said. Staff is with her. Margaret's eyes narrowed. And her grandparents? I didn't answer quickly enough. The nurse did, with that same careful hesitation. They came earlier, the nurse said. They left. Margaret didn't gasp. She just nodded once, like she'd filed the information under exactly what I suspected. Then she sat beside me and took my hand. I'm listed as your emergency contact, she said. I blinked. You are? You put me down years ago, she replied gently. Probably a school form. You knew who would show up. The comfort of that sentence came with humiliation. Because yes, some part of me had known. Before I could speak, the curtain swished again. My parents walked in like this was their scene to control. My mother wore her concerned face. My father's brows were knitted, serious. They looked like parents in a commercial. Then my mother saw Margaret. Her mask dropped so fast it was almost impressive. My father stopped mid-step and flicked his gaze to the nurse, then to the woman behind them with a clipboard social worker, then back to Margaret. He was counting witnesses. That's when I understood why they were here. Not remorse. Paperwork. The social worker cleared her throat. Thank you for returning. We need to document what happened earlier regarding the minor child. My mother's voice went sugary. Of course. There was a misunderstanding. Margaret's voice stayed calm. You abandoned your granddaughter in a hospital. We didn't abandon her, my mother snapped, then tried to soften it. You walked out, Margaret said, and you didn't take her. My father's jaw clenched. This doesn't need an audience. Margaret tilted her head. You made it public when you refused to care for a child in a public place. The social worker looked between them. If you are refusing to take custody tonight, we need that stated. My mother stiffened. We are not refusing. Margaret didn't blink. You refused earlier. That's why you called me. The social worker glanced at her notes. That aligns with our report. My mother went pale, real pale, the color of someone realizing there's now a record. My father cleared his throat. Where is Emma? In the family room, the nurse said, with staff. Margaret stood. She's coming with me. My mother's head snapped up. Excuse me? I'm taking her tonight, Margaret said. And as long as it takes, my mother's voice sharpened. You can't just take our granddaughter. Margaret looked at her, steady. You had your chance. The social worker nodded. Miss Margaret is listed as emergency contact. We can document a temporary care transfer. My mother's face attempted a smile and failed. She turned to me, suddenly soft. Honey, we'll take Emma now. We were just overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. I heard my mother's words from last night like glass breaking. She's too much. I said nothing. When Emma was brought in, she didn't run. She walked slowly, eyes scanning the room like it wasn't safe anymore. She looked at me, then at my mother, then back at me, waiting for the next blow. Margaret crouched to her level. Hi, sweetheart, she said. I'm going to stay with you tonight. Emma's eyes widened. You're taking me? Yes, Margaret said. Your mom is going to be okay, and you're going to be safe. Emma looked at me for permission. I nodded, throat tight. Emma leaned into Margaret like she'd been holding herself up for hours and was finally allowed to rest. My parents left again. This time, the room felt cleaner. The next morning, Margaret returned, tired but steady. Emma fell asleep holding my hand, she told me. She's safe. Then she hesitated. I need you to know something. They've been telling people a story about you. My stomach sank. What story? That you never help them, she said. That you're selfish. That you make everything hard. I stared at her. They said that? Margaret nodded once. For years. Something in my chest went cold. I've been sending them money every month, I said. Margaret's expression flickered confusion, then shock. How much? 2,000, I said. Every month. For 5 years. I opened my banking app. I scrolled. Transfer after transfer. The same number repeating like a heartbeat. And then the extras. $500, $1,000, $800. Always urgent. Always today. Margaret leaned closer, hand covering her mouth. Oh, she whispered. They told you I never sent a cent, I said, voice shaking. Margaret looked up at me, fury carefully contained. They lied to me, she said softly. And if they lied to me, they've been lying to you. That was the moment the fog burned off. Because once you put numbers on manipulation, it stops looking like family drama. It starts looking like a system. I came home sore and exhausted, but my brain wouldn't rest. Emma clung to Margaret at first, then to me, like she needed constant proof we weren't going to vanish. Every time she flinched at a loud noise, I felt it like a bruise. Margaret didn't push me to confront anyone. She just kept showing up. Groceries, quiet meals, a calm presence that didn't demand I perform gratitude. On the third day, she said, We're going to organize this. What? The money? I asked. Everything, she replied. Dates, transfers, messages. You need to see the pattern clearly. So we did. We printed 5 years of statements and highlighted the monthly transfers. Emma helped by placing sticky notes like she was doing a serious project. Then Margaret had me search my texts for words like deposit, urgent, appointment. Today, my mother's messages appeared in a stream of manufactured emergencies. Need it by 3 p.m. They'll cancel my spot. I didn't want to burden you, but you don't want me to get worse, do you? And my replies were there too. Apologies, reassurance, quick compliance. Margaret didn't shame me. She labeled what it was. Pressure, she said. Coercion dressed up as family. The more I looked, the more I realized how much of my life had been shaped around keeping those payments possible. I'd told myself I was fine, that it was just tightening my belt, that it was temporary. But 5 years isn't temporary, it's a lifestyle. I'd skipped trips, delayed dental work, bought the cheapest version of everything while telling Emma maybe for your birthday with a smile that hid mental math. I remembered standing in a store aisle comparing 2 identical packs of socks, calculating cost per pair like I was running a country, while my bank account quietly funded my mother's crisis narrative. And the worst part? My parents still had money for things that didn't look like medical hardship. New watches, nicer dinners. Photos of them clinking glasses with Laura, all, we deserve this energy. I'd seen those posts and swallowed the suspicion because I'd been trained to swallow things. Anger, doubt, my own needs. The hospital night made swallowing impossible. A week later, she hired a forensic accountant to build a clean timeline from my records. Then she hired a private investigator, not to break into bank accounts, but to collect public evidence, social posts, travel dates, luxury spending proudly displayed online. My parents loved looking like they were thriving. That vanity became proof. One night, Emma crawled into my bed and whispered, "If I'm quieter, will Grandma like me again?" My heart cracked. I pulled her close. "You don't have to shrink for anyone," I said. "If someone only likes you when you're smaller, that's not love." She stared at me in the dark. "But I made you faint," she said, voice shaking. "You didn't," I said firmly. "My body did. You saved me. You're not the problem, Emma. You never were." 2 months after the hospital night, my father's 60th birthday party arrived. A full house. Relatives, cousins, family friends. Exactly the kind of gathering my parents loved, because an audience meant the script could be reinforced. Laura is special. Claire is dramatic. My stomach churned as we walked in. Emma stayed glued to my side. My mother swept over, glowing hostess energy. "There you are," she chirped, air kissing my cheek. "You scared everyone." I stared at her. She meant you scared our image. She drifted away, laughing loudly, collecting admiration. My father hovered near the snacks, scanning the room. Laura sat like royalty, her kids bouncing around her, everyone praising her vacation stories. Eventually, my mother circled back and said to a relative, loud enough for the room to hear, "You know Claire always dramatic, always needs something." A few people chuckled. Habit. Emma's hand tightened around mine. Margaret stepped forward. "I'd like everyone to listen for a moment," she said. She didn't raise her voice. She just spoke like the decision had already been made. The room quieted, slow and uncertain. My mother blinked. "Margaret, what is this?" Margaret opened a folder. "You've been telling people for years that Claire never helps you." My mother's smile twitched. "Well," Margaret held up a hand. "I've seen the receipts." Air shifted. People leaned in. "For 5 years," Margaret said, "Claire has sent you $2,000 every month." My father's jaw clenched. Laura's smile collapsed. "That's 60 payments," Margaret continued. $120,000. Someone whispered, "No way." Margaret didn't look at them. There were also additional urgent payments, 41 transfers totaling $31,000. Silence thickened. My mother's face drained. My father stared at the floor. Laura looked stunned, like the room had moved without her permission. My father finally snapped, she offered. Margaret's gaze cut to him. "Then why have you told people she never helps you? Why paint her as selfish while you cash her transfers?" No one answered. Then Margaret said the part that turned the room from gossip to reckoning. "And why did you leave your granddaughter in the hospital to go on a retreat in Florida?" My mother's mouth opened and closed. Laura shot to her feet. "Enough!" she shouted, but it landed flat. Margaret's voice stayed even. Hospital staff documented that you refused to take Emma. Claire was in the ER, and your 6-year-old granddaughter was left with strangers. A ripple moved through the room. Shock, discomfort, anger. People glanced at Emma, then away, suddenly ashamed of their earlier chuckles. My mother tried to recover. We were overwhelmed. Margaret's eyes sharpened. You were on a boat. No one laughed now. No one looked away. Every eye turned to me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't perform. I said one sentence, calm enough to feel like steel. I won't send another cent. My mother made a small sound, like a protest trapped in her throat. My father's face tightened. Laura stared at me like she didn't recognize me. But the script had broken, and for the first time, there were witnesses who couldn't pretend they hadn't seen it. After the party, my parents tried every version of control they had. My mother called crying about humiliation. My father texted, "We need to talk." Laura posted vague quotes about toxic people and got a parade of heart emojis. I didn't respond, not because I was trying to punish them, because responding was the doorway they used to pull me back in. Margaret introduced me to a lawyer who didn't care about family narratives. She cared about evidence. "What can we prove?" she asked. That question saved me from the endless loop of feelings. She explained the difference between being wrong and being liable. My parents could say, "She offered," and emotionally, that might confuse people. Legally, it didn't erase deception. If someone knowingly lies about a medical need to induce repeated payments, that matters. If they create urgency and pressure to prevent you from verifying, that matters. If they misrepresent your support to others while benefiting from it, that supports the pattern. She had us create a binder. Tab A, monthly transfers. Tab B, urgent transfers. Tab C, the messages that triggered them. Tab D, public posts showing travel and luxury spending during the same windows. Tab E, hospital documentation about Emma's situation. Building it was brutal. Seeing my own words, "Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay," next to my mother's demands felt like reading a manual on how I'd been trained. But it also did something freeing. It made the truth boringly undeniable. Meanwhile, my parents tried to recruit other relatives as messengers. I got calls that started with, "Your mother is heartbroken," and ended with, "Can't you just forgive?" I learned to say one sentence and stop. This is being handled legally. No debate, no justification, just a closed door. The lawyer filed a demand letter. My parents responded with a long, emotional email about misunderstandings and how families help each other. Our lawyer answered with dates, amounts, and screenshots. We didn't try to prove where every dollar went. We didn't need to. We proved a pattern. Repeated claims of urgent medical needs tied to time pressure messages, paired with public spending and travel that didn't match the story. We proved my parents told others I never helped while they accepted thousands. And we included the hospital documentation showing they refused to take Emma. Negotiations dragged. My parents denied. Then they got angry. Then they tried bargaining. My mother messaged, "Let's work this out privately. You don't want to hurt the family. Hurt the family." I kept seeing Emma's face when my mother called her too much. I kept hearing Emma whisper, "I'll be good," like love was something she could earn by shrinking. Laura came to my apartment uninvited. She stood in my doorway wearing that polished smile she used when she wanted something. "Can we not do this?" she asked. "Mom is sick, Claire. Then she can show documentation," I said. "Bills. Receipts." Laura's smile faltered. "You're being cruel. Emma was 6 and sitting with strangers while you all were in Florida," I replied. Laura's eyes flashed. "Emma is sensitive." "She's a child," I said. "And you all punished her for it." Laura's face hardened. "You'll regret this." "Leave," I said. After that, we went no contact except through the lawyer. There was mediation one long day in a bland office where everyone spoke in careful tones. I didn't see my parents directly. Our lawyer did most of the talking. But I heard enough. My mother cried on cue. My father insisted I was misinterpreting. They offered small amounts first, like they were tossing coins to a beggar and expecting gratitude. At one point, the mediator asked what I wanted. The old me would have said, "I want us to be okay." The new me said, "I want the lies to stop, and I want restitution." Restitution sounded cold, but it was accurate. Because they hadn't just taken money, they'd taken years of my stability. They'd taken Emma's sense of safety. They'd taken my ability to trust my own eyes. When I came home from that mediation, Emma was on the couch with Margaret, building a tower of blocks. She looked up and asked, "Did you win?" I sat beside her and chose honesty. "Not yet," I said, "but we're making sure people tell the truth." Emma nodded, like truth was something you could build one block at a time. Months passed in meetings, emails, and stress that made my stomach hurt. Emma started therapy. At first, she drew more than she talked. One picture showed a small girl in a big room while adults turned away. Another showed a woman holding the girl's hand. I recognized Margaret without Emma naming her. The lawyer eventually called. "They want to settle." The settlement wasn't the full amount, but it was enough to matter. $75,000, part lump sum, part structured payments. No admission of wrongdoing. Fine. I didn't need confession. I needed the draining to stop. Signing the agreement felt like grief and relief tangled together. When the settlement was finalized, I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt hollow, like I'd amputated something infected and was now staring at the empty space. My therapist later told me that grief can show up even when you do the right thing, because you're grieving what you never had. Parents who would choose you and your child without conditions. The structured payments arrived monthly after the lump sum. Each time I'd open my banking app and see the deposit and feel a strange mix of relief and nausea. Relief because the story had consequences. Nausea because it had required lawyers to force basic decency. When the first deposit hit my account, I stared at it for a long time. Not because it made me happy, because it made me feel sane. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're oxygen. A year after the hospital night, life was quieter. Emma slept through most nights now. She still liked a small lamp on, but she didn't panic when I stepped into another room. She laughed more easily. The question, "Am I too much?" showed up less and less, like an old bruise fading. I changed too. I stopped bracing for emergencies that weren't real. I stopped rehearsing explanations for people who were committed to misunderstanding me. My parents tested the boundary occasionally, an email about reconciliation, a stiff card for Emma, a voicemail from my father that sounded like he was reading from a script. The lawyer handled what needed handling. I didn't respond. At first, the silence felt wrong. My nervous system had been trained to expect chaos. But slowly, the silence became a room I could breathe in. Margaret became our constant. Not loud love, consistent love. Sunday dinners at her house, Emma helping stir soup, Margaret listening, actually listening to Emma's dragon stories like they mattered. No strings, no guilt, no ledger attached. Margaret also opened a small trust for Emma. Nothing flashy, just solid planning. A quiet message that said, "Your future isn't a bargaining chip. This is so she never has to beg for safety," Margaret told me. Still, at night, doubt would creep in like a familiar voice. Was I too harsh? Was suing my own parents unforgivable? Did I go too far? There were practical changes too. With the settlement money and the structured payments, I rebuilt what I'd been quietly sacrificing. An emergency fund, a little breathing room, a dentist appointment I'd postponed for 2 years, groceries without the constant calculation. Small things that felt huge when you've lived in almost enough for too long. Emma noticed the shift before I did. One morning, she watched me pay a bill online and said, "You're not frowning." I blinked. "I guess I'm not." She grinned. "Your face looks like weekend." I laughed, and the sound surprised me simple, unguarded. Therapy helped. Slowly. Emma learned words for her feelings that weren't shame. She learned that being scared doesn't make you bad, and crying doesn't make you dramatic. Sometimes she'd come home and announce, very seriously, "I had a big feeling today and I handled it." Then she'd ask for a sticker like she'd finished a marathon. Margaret never tried to buy Emma's love. She never made gifts the center. She made presents the center. If Emma spilled juice, Margaret cleaned it up without sighing. If Emma got overwhelmed, Margaret didn't label her. She named what was happening. "That's a lot in your body right now," she'd say. "Let's breathe." Watching that steadiness rewired something in me too. I realized how often my own childhood had been a performance review. Be helpful, be easy, don't embarrass us, don't need too much. No wonder my nervous system had treated love like a job. Occasionally, an old family friend would run into me at the grocery store and say, "I heard things got complicated." Their eyes would dart, waiting for me to either defend my parents or condemn them. I learned a new answer. "Emma and I are doing well." Then I'd smile and change the subject. Not because I was hiding, because I was done offering my pain as entertainment. On the anniversary of the hospital night, Margaret invited us for dinner. No speeches, no ceremonies, just soup, bread, and Emma showing off a new drawing. In it, a girl stood in the middle of a big kitchen, holding a phone, and behind her a bright line connected to two figures with open arms. "That's you," Emma said, pointing at one figure. Then she pointed at the other. "That's Aunt Margaret." "And who's that?" I asked gently, pointing at the girl. Emma frowned like it was obvious. "That's me," she said. "I'm brave." I turned away so she wouldn't see my eyes fill. Later, after Emma fell asleep on Margaret's couch, Margaret said quietly, "She's going to be okay." I nodded. Sometimes I still hear my mother's voice in my head. Margaret's gaze was kind. "Of course you do. Voices like that don't disappear overnight, but they get quieter when you stop obeying them." That was the real aftermath. Not the settlement, not the money, not the public confrontation. The aftermath was learning to live without the constant low-level fear of being punished for having needs. And every time doubt showed up, every time I wondered if taking them to court was too harsh, I remembered that the harshest thing that happened in this story was not paperwork. It was a 6-year-old being told she was too much, and then being left behind. Now I want to hear from you. If you've ever been the one who gives and gives until you're empty, what was the moment you stopped tolerating it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Claire do the right thing, or did she go too far? And if you want more original stories about the moment someone stops accepting the way they're treated, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.